Scan somebody at a party.
And then I did
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dog, her, and baby.
God. Okay, well, good evening. My name is Angela McLaughlin, and as you know, I have 4 kids, and I'm a photographer. And the one thing I want to talk about is the importance of taking good pictures. And it's something all parents do. They want to remember every moment of the birth and the baby's first birthday and first walking and graduation and all that fun stuff. And every parent keeps the memories differently. Some people keep journals, but I think everybody takes pictures. And the pictures that you take will determine what you remember 20 years from now. And the better the pictures you take, the more you're going to be able to remember and look back and everything. So what I'll talk to you mostly about is the different settings you can do on your camera. And the way a camera works is the light comes through the camera through aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. And they all work together in a triangle. And when you set your camera on auto mode, it sets these things for you. You don't have to do anything. And whether or not it's a good combination is nobody's business but the cameras, I guess. And so what these are is aperture is the hole in the lens. If you look in the lens, even the point and shoots have them. This lens is very dirty. But you can see that there's a hole, and that's the aperture. That's the aperture, and the hole, however big the hole is how fast and how much light gets to the sensor. So the bigger the hole, the faster light gets to it, and the more light. So if you think about it as far as if you turn a faucet on and you just have it drip, it's going to fill up a cup a lot slower than if you just put it on full blast. So that's kind of the point with aperture. It controls how much light gets there, and the bigger the circle, which means the lower the number, gives you more light, and it gives you the blur effect in the background. It separates the subject from the background. And this kind of gives you an example like this today. This would be an example of a high aperture, which is a low number. You can see this is completely blurred, but this is in focus. This is like a medium. It's darker than the first one, and a little more in focus, but still blurred. And this one, you got everything pretty much in focus, but the background is black, because less light came through, but it has everything there. And it's fun to just play around with it, so if you get your cameras out later and every day and have fun with it. And shutter speed is the length of time the shutter is open. So when you press on it, however fast it does it. And you can see so that's kind of slow, fairly. And if I were to put it down here, it's so much slower. And the result, the 2 reasons is, one, you want a slow one to have motion, fireworks, lightning. If you want to show the Ferris wheel is moving, then you want a longer shutter speed. And also, if it's dark out, the longer the shutter's open, the more light's going to come. And this is also an example of it. This is taken with a very fast shutter speed, and it was almost dark, so it's kind of grainy. But if I were to zoom in, you could see every drop of the fountain. Whereas this one is a very slow shutter speed, and it was on a tripod. If you move, it's going to move everywhere. But it just completely has the movement of the fountain. And the thing with this, as far as kids go, is if you're trying to get a picture of them on an amusement park or a swing, you're going to want to do the fast shutter speed so that you actually get them in focus and not just the lower scan. And of course, I don't have ISO on here because there's not really anything in this show, but if you remember back from the old film days, where you had film speed like 100, film speed 200, 300, 400, that's ISO. It's how much light also gets, it kind of balances out everything else. And so if you have a situation in the sun where it's bright, you want a low ISO because it's going to bring in less light. And then the higher ISO brings in the more light. The higher ISO you go, you get grainy. And depending on which camera you have is depending on how much your camera can take. But so for example, if you were shooting with a film 400 on a film camera, outside in the daylight, you're going to get super, super bright photos. And it's going to be just full of noise everywhere because it wasn't the proper setting. Most cameras have, at least these things, I'll go over with you, you can't really see them too well, but I'll go over all these with you. On a standard camera, this is a very, very old point and shoot, but this one has all of the like scene setups, which I'll go over as it's the last half. And the newer cameras, like this is just a regular, I guess like an amateur DSLR. I know a lot of parents have these, but it has all of the settings we'll go over. And so what it is auto is full auto. You don't tell the camera to do anything. It decides if it flashes on, it decides if it flashes off, and it decides just whatever it wants to decide, just to get a balanced photo. The M on your camera, if you have one, is full manual. You choose everything. You choose the ISO, the shutter, the aperture, and just adjust. And I'll show you on a different screen how you go about doing that. The A and the S. A, S, and P are what we call partial manual. If you do A, and this is what I suggest a lot of people do, is because you're still keeping the camera some control, but you're taking over a little bit, you know, a part that's important. The A is what we call aperture priority. So if you want to take pictures that have the blur in the background, then you would set it to the A mode, and then you choose the aperture. And the camera says, okay, that's the aperture, so I'm going to select the shutter speed and the ISO that matches that to make a good triangle exposure. S is the same thing, but it's for shutter speed. If you want a fast shutter speed, then you set it on S, choose your shutter speed, and the camera says, okay, well, this is the aperture it needs, and this is the ISO that it needs to make a good exposure. P is called program mode. It's very close to auto, and that the only thing you set is the ISO. It chooses shutter speed and aperture. And then the other thing with those ones, with all the ones above, is you can also choose if the flash is on or off. It doesn't choose for you. And there's always a button on your cameras, and even in these, there's, I think it's the menu button, there's usually a button that I can manually put it up and down. And if I have it down, it's never going to go off. Because I'm telling the camera, I know what I'm doing, don't turn it on. As far as the other ones, and I think even the entry DSLRs and the point and shoots have, are the pictures. And the lady with the hat, that's the portrait mode. And that's going to, they're full auto into where you don't have to select anything. But what they all mean something different. The portrait mode is your camera's going to choose a lower aperture number, so it does give a little bit of blur, but it's going to choose everything for you. The mountain would be for like scenes, so it's another aperture priority, but it's a large aperture, so you're going to have more in focus. So it's going to choose a higher aperture number. The boy is for kids. It makes it a little more vivid, a little more saturated. The runner is for motion, so it's going to choose a fast shutter speed. The flower would be for, if you want something a little close up, it's going to have a larger aperture, smaller number. It's kind of confusing with that. And then the star is nighttime, so you're going to have a shutter speed that's left open longer, so it brings in more light. And this is just a diagram of my little camera, just what it looks like. And it also looks the same on this one, except for it doesn't have the top part. It just has auto and then the rest. And if you want to play around with manual, this is kind of how go about it. Where is our some media? This one's on here. The camera helps you a lot if you want to use manual. On most, or all of these kind of cameras, there's a kind of a line down under these numbers. And to get a good exposure, you can select what you want, but you want this to be right at 0. So if you see on this one, there's an arrow going this way. That means if you take the picture, it's going to be underexposed. And if the arrow's going this way, it's going to be overexposed. So you want to zero it out as close as you can, and you can just do that by just playing with the numbers, and you can watch it as you go, but you want to shoot it to where, roughly where you want to take the picture. And then once that's set, you're good for that scene. So if you're going to be taking pictures in the backyard for half an hour with the kids, set it to whatever you want manually, and then you shouldn't need to move it again unless the sun, clouds go over the sun or you move to the shade. Okay, so go ahead and span again. We added a couple more people. Okay. So again, if it's a setting for manual, just shoot it for the exposure. If you notice on the back of your camera that it looks a little dark, then you can tweak it from there, either by the shutter or the aperture to try to get the look that you want. And this is an example. I took these today of Caleb. And it's not too clear, so I also printed one out. But just to give you these were taken on my little camera. I wanted to do it as close to what regular parents would be taking. And this was on full auto. Like the camera chose everything that it wanted to, and it chose the ISO at 200. The aperture was at 4, and the shutter speed was 1/60th of a second, which is kind of slow. This one I put it on aperture priority, and you can see it does have a little blur. You can't see the little parts of the rug anymore. And it's a little lighter, and that was ISO 200. The aperture was down to 1.8, and the shutter speed was 1/320th of a second. So about 4 times faster, 5 times faster. And this is the one I set. I set it to the manual. And I set it at 200 for ISO, 1.8 for shutter, and I brought, for aperture, 1.8 for aperture. And I brought the shutter speed down to 1/200th of a second, so it brought more light in. And I'll pass it around because it looks much better on paper. And all of them are actually, pretty good. This one is darkened. I like to see the eyes, especially if you're looking back and you want to say, oh, his little blue eyes are so cute. Then it's nice to be able to go back and see the clarity, And by understanding what aperture and shutter speed and ISO are, it really can help you get a better understanding of what the camera's doing when you're taking a picture, so you can kind of take control of it yourself, get the better pictures, and then when you're looking back on them in 20, 30 years, you're going to not be so much looking at the picture, but looking at the moment. And you're not going to think, man, that's really dark, or you're going to say, wow, I remember when they were outside playing in the pool, and it's, they're truly going to be pictures that will say 1,000 words. Thank you.